How did the U.S. prepare for Russian nukes in Ukraine? Well, there's some reporting on this, and it comes from, it was reported yesterday on CNN, although try to find it. You pretty much need to search for it to find it. It's off of their main page. But Jim Sciutto has done research on a book, and he is reporting on the way the United States prepared for the potential of a Russian nuclear strike in Ukraine in late 2022. And the context here was that Ukraine was kind of hemming Russia in Kherson. And the U.S. was getting intelligence that, hey, Putin is worried about a collapse, worried about losing his troops, and might use nukes, right? This is the gist of the story. And that the U.S. was very alarmed and was planning on contingencies. And so now if this is true, right, because all of this is kind of, there's gaps because people are not going to talk even on background about a lot of details, but this would be really significant because it would be an example of active deterrence, and we don't see many of those in history, right? So if this is true, this was a very historical event. And basically, to bottom line this thing, the United States was one getting ready. It laid the groundwork. It did several things. One, it had the intelligence, right? It was beefing up its intelligence, saying, hey, how can we identify these things? If we identify them and think a strike is imminent, what can we do to potentially preempt? And let me just say that preemption here would have almost certainly been conventional, although there are decidedly few details involved here. Almost certainly would have been conventional. The U.S. also got its allies on board, did a lot of diplomatic preparation, which is really important. If you're a democracy, you can't go to war until you get your political ducks in order. And most importantly, perhaps, the U.S. reached out to India and China. It reached out to Russia's friends, if you will, ally in one case, but people who were folks that Moscow might listen to, that Putin would view differently, and who would have other levers of influence to bring to bear. And so here we have this story. Now, in all cases of deterrence, it's really hard to say whether it works or not. Failed deterrence, kind of obvious. But successful deterrence, well, deterrence means that you're doing something or threatening to do something to get someone to not do something you don't want them to do. And so the only, when it works, they do nothing. Nothing happens. And the question then becomes, well, did they not do what you didn't want them to because of what you threatened or implicitly threatened, or were they never going to do it in the first place, or did they have another reason? You can't ever really tell. And this is certainly going to be a case of that. Obviously, failed deterrence, that's what we see, right? Failures are more obvious. When it comes to a couple things here, the preemption issue, right? That, there's not a lot on that. But, this idea that the United States might have been ready if they got the chance, if they could take the shot, it sounds like the U.S. was ready to do it. And that might have been, and certainly that is something they needed to have their allies on board to say, look, if we think it's imminent and we can attack the delivery system, attack the command and control structure, we're probably going to do that, right? And I'm way reading between the lines here, but that, the simple word preemption, that's what we're talking about. Clearly, though, by the way, the United States would never use nukes in a preemption like this because we don't need to, right? We have very sophisticated weapons, and we have things that will precisely hit where we want them to. And if we knew for certain there was something was going to happen, we would hopefully, or it would be likely that we would have enough intelligence in that situation to go and do something. We would, there's no way you'd say, well, we think there's a nuke somewhere around here, so let's blow up the whole place. Totally counterproductive. So preemption is a conventional thing. And I think this is very important in terms of deterring Russia. And I always say, look, Russia should be deterred by NATO, not the other way around, because NATO has a lot of very viable, very powerful preemption, conventional measures it can take in escalation, right? Russia's pretty much escalated where what else have they got, right? And so the U.S. has still got a lot of arrows in its conventional quiver. When it comes, though, to China and India, look, when you're deterring someone from doing something, especially, if someone's going to do something risky, like use nukes, we always cast this, oh, they're evil or they're hateful. Or, the thing is, they're scared. Right there, and the intelligence here was that Putin was in a lost position. That they thought that if he thought his army was facing this imminent, humiliating defeat, that would be the circumstance in which he might use them. People in that situation, you can threaten them, but is that really, the whole point is they are ready to do something desperate to take a wild chance because they feel threatened, right? So adding threat can be counterproductive. When you approach an opponent's allies or friends or third parties, those folks, one, can be less threatening, and two, they can offer support. China probably told Russia something like, no, you can, don't use nukes because that U.S. is going to go crazy on you. You don't want to do that. But China can also offer support. Say, look, we're on your side. We've got your back. It's not going to be that bad. We will support you if something bad happens. And, people don't like to think this way, right? Oh, we don't want to give Putin anything. Well, the point is, if you're trying to posture, take a moral posture, that's great, right? If you're trying to pragmatically achieve an outcome, you have to think of what is going to make somebody, accede to, take a deal or take another way out. Not for nothing, when we dealt with, when NATO and the U.S. Rounded up the Kosovo conflict, we sent, the key thing is the Finnish president negotiated a deal, and we had the Russians on board. And so when they went to Milosevic, he had friends in the room. His supporters were there to say, no, you need to take this deal. So having third parties, having people that can take the side of your opponent in a negotiation, which is, deterrence is a tacit negotiation, right? And so the power of having something positive in there is it can be critical. I don't want to say it's always critical, but it can be. The idea that it's just threat, well, that's not going to get you anywhere. So I really think that the U.S. In the end, if this is true, and if the U.S. was successful, probably it was a case of the United States getting very serious, and in getting serious, demonstrating resolve. Probably other nations were like, oh wow, they are, they're telling us about these plans. They're consulting with their allies. These guys are serious, right? And so in that context, you go to China, which probably has its own intelligence. Probably, wow, yeah, you guys are serious about this. Hey, Russia, are you aware that what they're going to do if you do this? That's the kind of thing that goes in. That combination of the U.S. getting its ducks, military intelligence, political ducks in a row, and diplomatically reaching out, right? This seems to me to be the potential story. Again, this is tentative reporting. There's a lot of gaps in here, but I think it is going to be something that we really will want to take a look at over time, right? This is something that, as a political scientist who studies IR, we want more scholarly, definitive reporting on it, but it would be a very significant event on par with, the nuclear alerts around the Yom Kippur War and even maybe the Cuban Missile Crisis.